The text message came in on a Tuesday afternoon in October, while I was deadheading the rose bushes along our back fence. I had dirt on my gloves and reading glasses pushed up on my forehead when my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. I pulled it out, expecting something from my daughter Sarah, maybe a photo of the grandkids. Instead, it was from my husband of 38 years. Dorothy. The sale closed this morning. $2.8 million. I need you to sign some paperwork tonight. There's something else we need to discuss too. I remember standing there with my pruning shears in one hand and my phone in the other, reading those words twice. Something about the flatness of it. No, honey. No, can you believe it? No exclamation point. After the number we had both worked toward for nearly 2 decades, made my stomach drop before my brain had even caught up with why. James came home at 6:30, which was earlier than usual. He set his briefcase down in the hallway, the way he always did, hung his jacket on the hook by the door, and walked into the kitchen where I had dinner waiting. And for about 4 minutes, everything felt completely normal. He poured himself a glass of water, part of water, and for about 4 minutes, he asked how my day was. He sat down at the table we had eaten at together for 31 years, in the house we had bought together when Sarah was 7 years old. Then he reached into the inside pocket of the jacket he had just hung up and placed a large envelope on the table between us. I had Gerald draw these up last week, he said. I've already signed my set. I looked at the envelope. I did not touch it. What is this, James? He didn't look at me when he answered. He looked at the window above the sink, at the dark square of glass that reflected the kitchen light back at us. Divorce papers. I think we both know this has been coming for a while. I want to tell you that I said something composed and powerful in that moment. I want to tell you I stood up straight and told him exactly what I thought of him. But the truth is, I just sat there. 38 years of shared meals at that table, and my mind went completely blank. I felt like I had stepped off a curb I didn't know was there. The sale money, I finally said. The business is in my name, he said. And his voice had a rehearsed quality to it, like he had practiced this in the car on the way home. It has always been in my name, Dorothy. The LLC, the accounts, all of it. Gerald confirmed that what's in my name is mine. The divorce settlement would just be splitting the house and whatever's in our joint checking. I thought about the joint checking account. There was maybe $14,000 in it. We had always kept most of our savings in the business accounts because James had said it made more sense for tax purposes. I had believed him because I had always believed him, because for 38 years believing James had felt the same as breathing. I've already made arrangements, he said. He stood up from the table and picked up his jacket again, and I realized he was not planning to stay. I'll give you a couple of weeks to find an apartment. I'll cover first and last month's rent as a courtesy. A courtesy. After 38 years. After everything. He left that night and did not come back. For the first 3 days, I stayed with my sister Carol in Raleigh. I sat on her couch and stared at the wall and tried to do the math of my life. I was 63 years old. I had a small pension from the 12 years I had worked as a school librarian before I quit to help James grow his business. I had $14,000 in a joint checking account that my husband's lawyer probably already knew the balance of. I had a house that was... I was now remembering for the first time in many years, in both of our names. What I also had, though James had apparently forgotten this entirely, were 31 years of records. I need to explain something about myself. I am the kind of person who keeps things. My sister calls it a compulsion. My daughter calls it organized. James used to call it adorable, back when he called me things. When James started his manufacturing business in 1994, he was a man with a good idea. A small business loan, and absolutely no head for paperwork. So I did the paperwork. I managed the vendor relationships. I handled the bookkeeping for the first 11 years. until the business grew large enough that we brought on a full-time accountant. I sat in on partnership meetings. I drafted early contracts. I answered emails under James's name when he was traveling. I gave up going back to library work full-time twice. Once when the business was struggling in 2003, and once when James landed the Hartfield contract in 2009 and needed me to help manage the expansion. I never drew a formal salary. James had said it made more sense to keep that money in the business. I had believed him because I had always believed him, but I kept copies of everything. 11 years of bookkeeping records. Vendor correspondence with my name on it. Meeting notes in my handwriting. Emails from suppliers who knew me by name and copied me on everything because they knew I was the one who actually responded. Contracts I had helped negotiate. Printed and filed in the set of 4-drawer cabinets in our spare bedroom that James had always joked were my little archive. On the 4th day, Carol sat down next to me on the couch and said, "Dot, I need you to stop staring at the wall and start making phone calls." I looked at her. "What kind of phone calls?" "The kind where you talk to a lawyer before James has enough of a head start to make your life very difficult." Her own divorce, 15 years earlier, had taught Carol things about the legal system that I was about to need badly. She handed me a name on a piece of paper. Rebecca Okafor, family law attorney, Durham. "She's sharp," Carol said. "She won't let him walk away with everything." I called that afternoon. Rebecca Okafor had an office on the 2nd floor of a building near the courthouse, and she wore her reading glasses on a chain around her neck and had the organized, unhurried energy of someone who had seen every version of this situation and was never surprised by any of it. I sat across from her desk on a Wednesday morning and told her everything. And when I was done, she asked me to go back to the beginning and tell her again, slower, with more detail. When I finished the second time, she said, "You kept records." 11 years of bookkeeping. Yes. Vendor contracts with your signature. Some of them, yes. From the early years. And your name is on the deed to the house. Both our names. We bought it together in 1993. She looked at me over her reading glasses. "Dorothy, your husband has made a very significant error in his thinking." She said it calmly, without drama, the way someone might point out that a door had been left unlocked. He seems to believe that because the business LLC was registered in his name, the proceeds from the sale belong entirely to him. That is not how equitable distribution works in this state. I leaned forward. "What does that mean?" "It means that your contributions to the growth of that business, 11 years of bookkeeping, vendor management, contract work, every hour you put in, those are marital contributions. They are documented. And documented contributions to a marital asset are something a court takes seriously." She tapped the notepad in front of her. "What's the name of the buyer?" "Hartfield Industries. They bought the whole operation." She wrote it down. "And the sale price was $2. Whitmillion." That's what his text said. She nodded slowly. "What I need you to do before we file anything is go home or have someone go with you and get every piece of paper in those filing cabinets. Everything. Don't leave a single folder." I did not sign the divorce papers James had left on the table. I called Sarah that night and told her what was happening, and there was a silence on the phone so long I thought the call had dropped. Then my daughter said, very quietly, "Mom, tell me everything." Sarah came the next morning, and we spent 4 hours going through the filing cabinets together. She took photographs of every document on her phone as a backup. We found things I had half forgotten about, a letter from a supplier in 2001 thanking Dorothy and James for saving the relationship after a shipment dispute. Handwritten notes from the meeting where we had first discussed the Hartfield contract. In my handwriting, on a notepad, with our kitchen phone number printed at the top. Tax returns from 2001, through 2005, where I had been listed as an unpaid contributing spouse. Sarah kept stopping to show me things and shaking her head. "Dad really thought you'd just walk away," she said. "He thought I'd be too shocked to look closely," I said. And that was probably true. For the first week, I almost was. What I found out later through Rebecca, through the financial discovery process, was that James had already moved $600,000 from the business sale proceeds into a separate personal account 3 days before he came home with the divorce papers. He had also, Rebecca told me, been in a relationship with a woman named Karen for approximately 8 months. Karen was 44 years old and worked in sales at one of James's industry contacts. She was the reason the divorce papers had been drawn up by Gerald before the sale had even officially closed. I want to be honest about how I felt when I heard all of this. I felt humiliated. I felt stupid for not seeing it. I had 38 years of memories that I now had to hold up to the light and re-examine. And that process is not a clean or a comfortable one. There were nights at Carol's house when I thought about everything I had given up. The library career, the salary I never took, the years I had poured into a business that had never technically had my name on it, and the weight of it felt almost physical. But here is what I kept coming back to. The filing cabinets, the 4 drawers full of careful, meticulous, dated, signed documentation of every significant contribution I had made to 31 years of that business. James had called it adorable when I kept records. He had forgotten that what is documented can be proven. Rebecca filed the equitable distribution claim in November. James's lawyer, Gerald, a man I had known socially for 15 years, who had eaten dinner at our table, sent back a response, arguing that Dorothy had been a supportive spouse but had no formal employment relationship with the LLC and therefore no claim to the sale proceeds. He used the words informal assistance. Rebecca sent back 47 pages of documentation. She also filed for a temporary order preventing James from moving or spending any more of the proceeds while the case was pending, which the judge granted within a week. The $600,000 that had been quietly moved to the separate personal account was frozen. I will tell you that I did not enjoy the legal process. It was slow and expensive, and there were moments when I sat in Rebecca's office and wanted to ask whether it would just be easier to take the $14,000 and the house and call it finished. Rebecca looked at me the one time I said something like that and said, very evenly, "Dorothy, he built a $2.8 million company. You have documentation proving you contributed to it for 11 years without compensation. Walk away if you choose to. But understand what you would be walking away from." I did not walk away. The financial discovery phase revealed several things that Gerald had probably hoped would stay buried. The business tax returns from the early years showed my labor clearly, even if unpaid. An accounting expert Rebecca hired calculated the fair market value of the services I had provided over 11 years. Bookkeeping, vendor management, contract support at somewhere between $380,000 and $490,000. Had those services been performed by a paid contractor? There were also 2 personal loans I had made to the business from my own savings in 2002 and 2004, totaling $47,000. That James had never formally repaid because we were married. It was all the same pot. Rebecca added those to the list. James's lawyer tried 3 different arguments over the following months. First, that my contributions had been gifts, freely given within the marriage. Second, that I had been compensated through our shared marital lifestyle. Third, and this one made Rebecca actually put her pen down and look at the ceiling for a moment, that I should have asked for a salary if I wanted one, and that my failure to do so was my own responsibility. The judge did not appear to find any of these arguments persuasive. In March, we went to mediation. James arrived with Gerald and they sat across the table, and James looked, for the first time, like a man who understood that things were not going to go the way he had planned. He had aged, I thought, in the 5 months since he had left his briefcase in the hall and placed an envelope on our dinner table. Or maybe I was just looking at him differently now. The mediator was a quiet man named Douglas, who had the patient manner of someone who had watched many couples destroy years of their lives in conference rooms. He moved back and forth between our 2 rooms for most of the morning. At one point, Gerald came in to make what he clearly considered a generous offer. Rebecca listened, thanked him, and said she would need to discuss it with her client. When Gerald left, Rebecca looked at me. "It's about 40 cents on the dollar," she said. "We can do better." We did better. The final settlement took another 6 weeks to finalize. Because our state follows equitable distribution, not community property, the judge considered the length of the marriage, the economic and non-economic contributions of each spouse, and the impact on each party's future financial situation. 38 years of marriage, 11 years of documented business contribution, a wife who had given up career advancement twice to support her husband's business, a pension that would not be enough to retire on alone. James kept 60% of the sale proceeds. He argued for this successfully because the business had been formally registered in his name and he had been the primary operator for the last 2 decades. Gerald presented this as a victory. James did not look like a man who had won 60% of $2.8 million. He looked like a man who had expected to keep all of it. I received 40%, $1,120,000, as my equitable share of the marital asset. The family home, which had always been in both our names and which James's lawyer had somehow never seriously addressed, was included in the marital estate. We sold it that spring. I received half of the equity. Between the home sale and the business proceeds, I also received my half of every account we had ever shared, including the retirement accounts James had been funding for 30 years while I had been keeping records in the spare bedroom. Rebecca also negotiated 5 years of spousal support, which Gerald fought hard on and lost harder on, given the documented disparity in our earning capacities and the years I had spent supporting James's career over my own. I found out about the $47,000 in loans from my own savings when Rebecca added them to the final accounting. James looked surprised when she brought them up, or he pretended to. I had the loan paperwork in my filing cabinet, the date, the amount, the note in James's handwriting that said he would pay it back when things settled down. Things had now settled down. In June, 6 weeks after the settlement was finalized, I put a deposit on a small house 20 minutes from where Sarah lives. It has a room I am turning into a proper library, with built-in shelves and a reading chair by the window. The garden needs work, which is fine with me because I have always found gardening clarifying. I kept my filing cabinets. They're in the spare room of the new house. Still organized the way I organized them in 1994, when James first needed someone to manage the paperwork of a small business with a good idea and a loan. Carol says I should get rid of them now that there's nothing left to document. I told her I'd think about it. I want to say something to anyone listening to this who might be in the place I was in, sitting on a couch at your sister's house, staring at a wall, doing the arithmetic of a life and coming up short. The thing that James relied on was not cruelty, exactly. It was the assumption that I would be too overwhelmed to look carefully, that the shock of the moment would make me practical. Practical, in the way that means accepting less than what you're owed because the alternative seems too hard. The alternative was hard. I won't tell you otherwise. It was slow and expensive, and there were months of it that I don't enjoy remembering. But every hour I had spent keeping records, every folder I had ever labeled and filed, every email I had ever saved, all of it mattered in the end. Not because I had planned for this. I hadn't. I kept records because it was how I did things. Because I was the kind of person who believed that what you document, you can prove. James had spent 38 years watching me organize his life. He had called it adorable. He never once considered that I might use it against him. I don't think of it as using it against him. Actually, I think of it as showing a court what I had actually contributed to 38 years of a life we were supposed to be building together. The documents didn't lie about what I had done. They never had. Sarah came over the first weekend I was in the new house, and we unpacked boxes together and made sandwiches on paper plates because I hadn't found the dishes yet. She kept stopping to look around at the rooms and smiling in the quiet way she has, the way she's had since she was a little girl. At some point, she put her arm around me at the kitchen counter and said, "You look like yourself again, Mom." I thought about that for a moment. I thought about the woman who had stood in a garden with pruning shears and an apron and read a text message that had no exclamation point. I thought about the 4 days on Carol's couch. I thought about 47 pages of documentation and a mediator named Douglas and a lawyer who wore her reading glasses on a chain and had never once told me to settle for less than what I was worth. "I think I do," I said. "The rose bushes at the new house are overgrown and will need to be cut back before spring. I have already bought new pruning shears. I leave my phone inside when I garden now, not because I'm afraid of what it might say, but because the garden is better without it, and because I have learned something important about which hours of the day should belong entirely to me. My name is Dorothy. I was a librarian, and then I was a business partner who was never called one, and then I was a woman, sitting on her sister's couch, trying to understand how 38 years had added up to an envelope on a dinner table. Now, I am a woman with a house near her daughter and a room full of books and a garden that needs work. And I am 63 years old, and I am not finished. I never signed those divorce papers James left on the table. I signed those instead, the ones that came with $1,120,000 and 5 years of support, and my half of a home we had bought together when our daughter was 7 years old. James forgot a great many things. He forgot that contributing to something for 38 years gives you a claim on it. He forgot that 31 years of records don't disappear just because you stop believing the person who kept them. He forgot that a woman who organized his entire professional life for 2 decades might be very good at finding what she needs when she finally needs to find it. Mostly, though, he forgot that I was paying attention the whole time. To everyone watching this from wherever you are, thank you for being here. If this story reached you at a moment when you needed it, I hope it gave you something useful. And if you know someone who kept records, who organized quietly and contributed without credit, and believed for a long time that love made contracts unnecessary, please share this with them, not because their story will end exactly like mine, but because they should know that what you document, you can prove. And what you can prove, you can fight for. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one.